So gaming on Linux for a long time didn't really exist to the extent as it did on Windows. Most games didn't even support Linux, and if it didn't support it, you couldn't really even run it on Linux. Of course, there were some workarounds like Wine, but they never really worked that great, and even then it was still a hit or miss on if it even worked at all. The last years this changed pretty significantly though. So where do we stand now? Well, it's pretty much as simple as installing Linux, like I use Ubuntu. You install Steam, and from Steam you just enable Proton, and then you can run every game you want. Pretty much. There probably still will be some exceptions, but until now I haven't found any game that didn't work yet. So now my question is, how well does it work for Simracing? So what I did is I installed rFactor 2 because that's my go-to simulator. I ran a few tests, like high settings, low settings, with 30 cars, so 29 AI that is, and just single player. And I just compared the lowest and the highest frame rates with Linux versus Windows, and I put them in a graph. So all the tests are run on Circuit d'Azur, which is the Monaco Formula 1 track, but you can't name it like that because of legal reasons. And here are the results. So let's start at the left top, which is high settings, 29 AI, so 30 cars total. It is actually very interesting. I find this very interesting because this game runs on DirectX 11, which is pretty much made for Windows. There is no DirectX support for Linux. And if you go to the lowest frame rate, there's only 9 frames difference. That's not a lot. At the highest frame rates they got though, there was a little bit more, like 22 frames difference. But nothing too bad. That is very playable because 71 frames at its lowest, that with 30 AI on high settings, that is very playable. So let's go to the single player then. Here you see a little bit more difference. The lowest suddenly is more than 35 frames difference, and at the highest it's even more than that. But still, those frames are very playable. And these are high settings. So after that we went to low settings. With 29 AI, the interesting thing was that Linux didn't really gain a lot of frames at its lowest, and also not on its highest compared to the high settings. Only 7 frames difference, for example, at its lowest. And here's also the part where you see Windows taking a step ahead of Linux. 78 compared to 108, that is quite a difference, and 135 to 187 is a massive difference. Do mind though that those numbers are only affecting you a lot when you have like a 144Hz screen, or in my case a 165Hz screen. So then the last test, which was low settings in single player, numbers are amazingly high. 179 lowest for Linux versus 226 on Windows. Still a pretty big gap, but unless you've got like a 240Hz screen, you're not gonna notice that. And at its highest, 242 to 305, man, you need more than 240 Hz to notice that. So even though there is a big difference in frame rates, Linux is very acceptable these days. So why don't we see all the sim racers jumping over to Linux? Aside from the fact that they want all the frames they can get, so there's actually a lot more to sim racing than just frame rates. We've got like usually not even a single screen, we've got triple screen, or VR, or even simpler, what normal gamers don't have, is like a steering wheel, or pedals. And here is where Linux still is lagging behind. It isn't really all on Linux either. VR, definitely if you are on Steam VR, I think every headset is supported. I haven't tested frame rates out yet and how heavy it is to run, but it is. I've checked it out and it runs very good. If you go Oculus though, I have a weird feeling that it's not being supported on Linux. I didn't look this up though, didn't test it, so that's just a wild guess. Steering wheels, Pedals, my pedals are Heusinkvelds and they actually work perfectly fine. Like in RFactor 2 you can set like a minimum and a maximum. If you set it up, there's really no problem. To the wheel though, I use a Fanatec DD1 and I've looked up many forums and all end up with the same outcome. Fanatec is not interested in supporting Linux yet. There is a massive dead zone in my wheel, which I've seen someone with a command fix, but on my DD1 it didn't work. Well, he was on a Club Sport 2.5 where it did work, but that's just half of it, because on the other end you've got force feedback, which simply doesn't work. Now I do know that I've seen people with Logitech wheels which got it to work, simply because I think they even have Linux support in general. I didn't check that either, but again, this really shows that on the peripheral department, Linux still isn't caught up with Windows. And I think it takes more than just Linux to get there. We need like Fanatec and all those people on board. So, my end conclusion. Is Linux ready for sim racing? Not yet. There's just too much stuff that isn't working yet, or like the frame rates are still on the low end. So there's no point in going to Linux even if everything worked. But I'm not giving up hope. The trend which Linux is having right now is that the line is going up, and if it keeps going, it can surpass Windows. It already does in some games, so why wouldn't that happen for sim racing? So I hope Linux just continues working on this, and I hope drivers will get Linux support as well for wheels. But for now, Linux is not ready for sim racing. So thank you guys for watching. If you have questions, put them in the comments and I'll be sure to answer them. If there are more simulators you want me to test, just comment as well. If there's enough animo I want, I definitely will do more videos of this. And I hope you learned a lot from this. And see you guys next time.